Good evening. I'd like to call the regular City Commission meeting of Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018 to order, and ask all of you to please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have copies of the agenda available at the recorder's desk and at the back of the room. We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any changes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda. Approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Communications. We do have a couple of resignations that we need to, 3 of them actually, that we need to accept. We have a motion from anyone?
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we accept the resignations of Mr. Reddish from the Environmental Advisory Committee
Actually,
pursuant.
it's Barry Lyons. He sent that to Aaron Reddish, but
Oh,
Barry Lyons is the one.
sorry, Aaron, I apologize to you. I just saw your name. I apologize. This is Barry Lyons, thank you. And Rob Melching from the Long Range Budget Advisory Committee, and Susan Whitus from the Senior Advisory Committee. We regrettably accept these 3 resignations, but we'll do our best to find good people to fill them.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have our state representative, Robert Wittenberg, here with us this evening.
Erstwhile state representative.
Good evening, everyone. Well, thank you for having me. I actually just wanted to drop in and say hello, and wanted to let people know about upcoming community conversations that we're going to be hosting. Again, these are informal events where people can come speak to me and voice any kind of concerns, ask any questions, and also give a brief update as to what's going on in Lansing. So, like I tell everyone, I want to be as accessible as possible to everyone. Don't feel obligated to come to any one of these. You can always call, you can email, but this is just kind of an informal setting where you can come hear about what's going on in Lansing and voice any kind of concerns or thoughts that you have. We had a couple of them in September, so those have already passed, and one in Hazel Park, one in Oak Park. Again, there are 7 communities that comprise the 27th district, so every month we try to do 2, and do 1 during the daytime, 1 in the evening, so depending on people's work schedule, and then rotate between the communities. So the next one coming up will be Monday, October 15th at 1 o'clock, and that's at the Royal Oak Township Library, which is a Ferndale mailing address, 21131 Garden Lane. And then on Tuesday, October 16th at 6:30 p.m. at the Pleasant Ridge Community Center. And then I'll be here in wonderful Huntington Woods, my hometown here, Thursday, November 8th at 6:30 p.m. and it'll be at the library. And then Friday, November 9th at 11 a.m. at the Berkeley Public Library. And then the last one of this calendar year, Friday, December 7th at 11 a.m. at the Ferndale Area District Library. So again, it's a good way for people to come out and hear what's going on in Lansing and voice any concerns that they have. We usually have some really good discussions, and it's different every meeting depending on who's there. So invite people to come by. If you're not able to come to one of those meetings, I encourage you to reach out to me. You can email me at it's Robert Wittenberg at house.mi.gov, or call 517-373-0478. And I don't have much of an update for you tonight. It's relatively slow in Lansing because it's election season. We actually have, I was talking about this earlier, the Speaker of the House is running for Attorney General, so he has that on his plate. But we were in Lansing today, and we'll be there this week, and then not much else, not many other days until after the election. And it could be interesting, depending on how the election goes, what's going to go on in Lame Duck. So I'll keep you all apprised of what's going on and stay in touch as issues arise. So that was really it. I just wanted to announce these community conversations and then see if any of you have any questions or if there's anything you need from me or anything you need me to be aware of. Otherwise,
Any questions?
short and sweet.
I think you're good.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
I'm here if you ever need anything. So thank you. Appreciate it.
We also have with us this evening a representative from the council, the teen council, Julie Schettenhelm.
Hi, I'm Julia Schettenhelm, and I'm the council coordinator of Teen Council. And I just wanted to give a quick update of what's happening. So, in light of Tracy Shanley's absence, we are going to have our first meeting as a social this year on October 18th at 7 o'clock. So, unlike our normal Teen Council meetings, they're a little bit more formal. We're going to have an informal one where we get to know everybody and spread some information about Teen Council for new and returning members. And there'll be snacks and like roundtable discussions, and we'll get some feedback about what the teens want this year. Also, Youth Symposium, the M Parks Youth Symposium is November 2nd through 4th, and I'm on the host council, so I'm helping plan it this year, and myself and a few other teens will be attending, so that should be pretty good. And that's pretty much it for now, because we don't have a lot planned because of Tracy's absence. But are there any questions?
Why don't you let people know again when the social is in case anybody's interested in dropping in?
Yeah, that's October 18th. That's a Thursday at 7 o'clock at the Rec Center.
Thank you.
Yes.
Does the Teen Council participate in the Tri-Community Coalition?
I don't believe we do.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I don't think so. Thank you
Okay.
very much for coming in and keeping us updated.
Thank you.
I did forget to mention that Commissioner Rozell is not going to be here this evening. He is excused. He's actually in Washington, D.C. testifying on matters of election security. So we're glad to have a representative there from our hometown, but luckily he's not testifying to other issues that are going on in Washington. Public participation. Now is an opportunity for the public to discuss anything that is not on the agenda. Seeing none, public participation is closed, and we'll move on to the regular items of business. And the first item of business is a discussion regarding uninsured motorists benefit coverage for city employees.
Yes, this is an item that we placed on the agenda. Commissioner Olsman brought it to our attention that if an employee is injured while driving on the job, that the insurance benefit he thought was too low for employees that were severely injured. So he's asked our insurance representative, Keith Potter, to take a look at whether or not we can increase that cap. And I believe Keith is here to give us an update.
Good evening. Keith Potter, representing Michigan Municipal Risk Management Authority. Did speak with Commissioner Olsman and Amy regarding the uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. We have gone out to the market, approached, off the top of my head, probably 30 markets, which are not options. I have approached the MMRMA, and I am working with them to hopefully increase either the City of Huntington Woods or all members, which are about 380 cities, counties, villages within the state of Michigan that are part of the MMRMA, to increase that benefit, increase that limit, if you will. And I'm working with them. It will be a process.
Can you take a second and just
Sure.
Enlighten everyone as to what exactly we're talking about when we talk about uninsured and underinsured motorist benefits.
Okay. I've taken this right from the Department of Financial Insurance Services website. When I read this, this is going to read as if it's a personal auto policy, and it is brief. I will add one thing at the end. These coverages will pay if an uninsured or underinsured motorist seriously injures you or a member of your household. If you are awarded a settlement from the at-fault driver and they have insufficient or no liability coverage, your uninsured or underinsured coverage will apply. Uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage is usually sold with limits of $20,000 per person, $40,000 per accident. This coverage will not pay for damage to your vehicle. The one thing I will add, obviously, if it's one of our employees, any type of a work situation, that employee is first line of coverage for medical benefits and work loss benefits is a work comp policy, which the city does have. Uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage is a benefit in addition to work comp coverages. The carrier for the city, Michigan Municipal Risk Management Authority, the limit is $100,000 per person, $250,000 per accident.
Okay.
Further question?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, first of all, whatever you're reading from is, I take it, a few years old, because at one time there were carriers that didn't write underinsured or uninsured and or underinsured benefits, period. Now virtually every carrier in Michigan writes it. Some will not write it above a certain limit. Others write it as high as $1 million or whatever you want to pay for. Just for the purpose of background, I represent a police officer in another city who was seriously injured in an accident while driving a city-owned vehicle. He was struck by an individual. Based on the age of the vehicle, we haven't confirmed this yet, but it's not likely that it's going to be a substantial type of insurance policy on it, so it's likely going to be a lower limit policy. And so when, in that case, what gives rise to this was I spoke to the claims person from MMRN, or whatever it's called, and she said, well, hold on to your seat, because they don't write any more than $100,000 per individual. So I spoke to our police chief, Andrew Pasikowski, public safety director, excuse me. He had no idea about that. Amy had no idea about that. And yet, on the other hand, for police officers, and that's who we're primarily looking at here, because I don't see a great deal of risk to a Huntington Woods DPW employee driving a dump truck. I think that individuals, I'd rather be riding with him than whoever else is involved. So we're not talking about substantial risk to others, although there is. Anytime the person takes a city-owned vehicle, there's always that risk. But for police officers, it's a very high risk, in my opinion, just based on what they do. If they're in pursuit or whatever, I mean, short of firearm incidents, I would think this would be one of their greater risks, and I know Andrew Pasikowski agrees with me. What I don't understand about this is, I understand when you say they don't. I don't understand why not, because uninsured and underinsured motorist is not, I haven't seen the loss ratios on it, and I don't pretend to be an insurance maven or guru, but it seems based on what you have to pay for the coverage on your own policy, it's relatively nominal compared to other things, which tells you that the risk levels must not be that high, or the premium would be much higher. So, well, I understand it's what our carrier or the pool has traditionally done or not done, which is of no interest to me whatsoever. The question is, what are they going to do going forward? So my plan is to contact all the police chiefs in Michigan through their organization and let them know about a fact that I'm going to suspect many of them don't know. And that's what happens in this circumstance. And so, considering the nature of the service that the police perform for everybody, considering the risk involved and considering what's probably nominal cost, it would seem to me that the pool either could self-insure or create some sort of captive or something like that, which was suggested. As you know, I have a relative, a first cousin, who's formerly was an executive with Aon in New York, which is one of the largest insurance brokerage houses in the United States. And I brought it up to her because I don't know anybody else in that line of business, and I just asked her for her suggestions on it. She suggested potentially creating a captive type entity just to deal with this. But I just am at a loss to understand why it isn't even available. If, say, we wanted to pay an additional premium, which I would submit the city can afford to do and should do for our police officers, why it's not available at a higher level. I mean, my own individual underinsured motorist coverage and uninsured is a $1 million limit, because candidly, that's one of the biggest risks you face, is being hit by somebody either with no insurance or very low limits. And so maybe you can, I know this is your business, and frankly, I would think you'd be all in favor of selling policies if you could, that were available. So what is your sense of the reluctance, whether it be historical or not, and what is your view of the future in terms of getting them to go along with an improved benefit like that?
First, from the standpoint of the MMRMA, the original benefit for that line of coverage up until 1999 was $20,000, $40,000. Okay, it was increased
Think about
by.
that.
Just historically speaking, I'm telling you
I
what.
understand.
1999, it was increased to the 100,000, 250,000. And of course, they look at those things, and I'm 100% comfortable that they are going to be looking at this again now that it's been brought up. And whether they hear from others or not,
Helpful, wouldn't it be?
well, yeah, it doesn't, no harm to me. I would love for it to match the $15 million limit of liability that the city of Huntington Woods has, but whatever.
It doesn't.
It is not
That's
expensive.
different kind of insurance.
Yeah.
That's protect.
I understand.
That's coverage for the city. Doesn't have to be that high, but it certainly should be. My recommendation would be it should certainly be offered at $1 million. That should be the limits for that kind of coverage. Because,
I don't disagree.
Because the officer I represent is badly injured, and it's unlikely that he's going to be able to return. He's a young guy, return to work in any kind of meaningful capacity. And yes, it's true he gets workers' comp. Yes, it's true he gets the no-fault differential till 3 years is up. And yes, it's true his medical is covered. But I mean, his life, his wife's life are not going to be the same.
I'm sure. Outside of the MMRMA, as I had outlined, we approached a number of direct carriers that we write directly with and through what's called excess surplus lines brokers, which go even to the Lloyd's of London syndicate and whatnot. The issue there is, my opinion, trying to separate uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage and just buy that. That's one part that's impossible, because you're separating it out from, separating one benefit from a policy, okay? Obviously, that was the main reason. A lot of insurance carriers really don't, they're not in the market to cover automobile policies for governmental entities. That's another, large hesitancy that we ran into.
That's what Dr. Newman brought up was,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
my cousin with respect to municipalities and how many vehicles and so forth.
And then specifically, and if the MMRMA does make this change, it will be for all vehicles, not just for law enforcement vehicles.
Right. All
But specifically-
city, all municipal.
Correct. Even those dump trucks you talked about.
I know.
There are carriers that don't want to write automobile liability insurance and uninsured motorist coverage for law enforcement personnel without also writing the law enforcement liability, because sometimes those two cross over into their own little realm, and if they're separate carriers, sometimes you get each carrier pointing at the other. That's yours, that's your, and it doesn't work.
Every chance they get.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the problem I'm running into in the market as far as taking care of something right, taking care of this issue right now. I have met with and have talked to a number of people at the MMRMA. They've got to do their research to report to their board of directors, which are governmental people, just like yourselves. They've got their own fleets that they manage, their own employees that they manage.
Are the loss ratios for that coverage available?
I have not been
For
given
your-
them.
for-
They are within the
Can
MMRMA.
you get those for us?
Should be able to. I've asked for them.
Okay.
My
How
suspicion.
many claims they paid?
Oh, yeah. And my suspicion is it's not going to be a lot, because in my short 43 years and 11 months, I've had one claim.
For a municipality?
No, all of my clients, municipal or non, one uninsured motorist claim.
I've seen lots of them.
Not doubting that, I'm just,
It's all good cases.
it's not something I've seen a lot of.
I get it.
And I don't believe that I can even sit back and say I've heard of many of them at the MMRMA. Doesn't mean they're not there.
You only need one bad one.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right.
Any time frame guesses
Well,
on their process?
The MMRMA, being a governmental entity, doesn't work fast. My suspicion is if I'm successful with this, we're probably looking, all of their coverage changes come on July 1. So if I'm successful, my guess is July 1, 2019. If I can get something sooner, just for the city, while they're looking at the rest of the membership, then great, and I'll get back to you.
But see, as you know, this doesn't become a factor or even a matter of interest till it happens to you or someone you care about. That's when it becomes something that people think about or try. It's true of insurance claims generally, because as you know, from your 44 years in the business, what's the one thing people are most interested in when they buy insurance? How cheap they can get it, thinking that they're never gonna need it, it'll never happen to them. And like I said, I don't intend to sit back and say it's okay to expose, like I said, in this case I have has opened my eyes to a situation that I didn't even pay attention to before in terms of the municipal risk. But I assure you that Chief Pazukowski shares my view, and if he does, I'm sure other law enforcement people will as well, particularly if it's a reasonable minor charge that gives them adequate protection. That's all it is. That's all we're
Yes,
asking.
and 100% agree with your stance on that, to the point that my employees, outside of the municipal arena, when we quote anyone's auto insurance, whatever limit they've asked for, that's the limit that's quoted on uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. And we don't even ask.
Because it's a very inexpensive
Yeah,
benefit.
yes, it is.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. Good. Well, get in there and sell
Do my damnedest. Any other questions?
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
it.
No,
Thank you. Thanks for taking time on it. Sure.
Item number 2, matter of consideration of a change order at the Gillum Recreation Center for transfer switch.
Yes, we had, city had awarded the bid for the transfer switch to Rayhorn Electric, and once they started construction, they discovered that we needed a new CT cabinet. There's one that exists right now, but the meter is inside of it, and they need to separate the meter from the rest of the wiring. There's a change order, they submitted a change order for $14,000, which covers the new cabinet as well as the installation. This is something that is necessary in order for the generator switch to work at the recreation center. And the memo that Tim had provided, you could see that, even with the $14,000 change order, Rayhorn still would have been the low bidder, therefore staff is recommending that the change order be approved.
So move.
Second.
Any public questions or comments? Okay, any comments or questions from the commission? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item number 3.
This is an ordinance amendment. This would be the first reading. We do have an ordinance that places regulations for off-street parking spaces. Those are the permitted parking spaces between the street and the sidewalk. And we recently had an instance where a neighbor was parking in the off-street parking space that a homeowner had paid the $100 permit for. We realized when that complaint came to us that we don't have any mechanism to restrict parking in those off-street parking spaces to that homeowner and their guests. So this is a change to the ordinance that would clarify that and also set a penalty for individuals that did park in the parking spaces that weren't supposed to. And I did have a call on this from a resident this afternoon that wanted to know if public safety was going to go out and proactively check all the license plates of people parked in no parking spaces, in the off-street parking spaces, and I said, no, this is gonna be complaint-driven only.
We have a motion to approve the first reading.
So move.
Second.
Any public comment or questions? This is a first reading. While Claire's coming up, I'll just explain that we now have a 2-step process, so that gives the public the opportunity to come back at our next meeting for a final reading and approval with any comments as well.
I have 2 questions to the commission. Oh, Claire Goad, 10084 LaSalle. I think that's my address. When I lived on Ivanhoe, we had an off-street parking. One is, how are we going to notify people who don't happen to live in Huntington Woods that they have to stay out of those? Because when I lived on Ivanhoe and we had an off-street parking, often people would park there because they would come, they were going to park on the street, saw that there was the off-street parking area and went in there. Often I had no clue, and often they were visiting someone down the street. So it seems to me that if I were the homeowner and I called public safety and told them, hey, somebody's parking in my space, you go and ticket them, and there's somebody from out of town, and that doesn't mean out of, where the license plate says Ohio or something like that, but they're just not from Huntington Woods, they're going to get a ticket and not have a clue what they got a ticket for. So that's one problem. The other thing is, does that preclude someone from parking on the street in front of those parking spaces? Because when I lived on Ivanhoe and we had an off-street parking and people didn't know what to do about them, people would park on the street. Legally, you can park on the street. Are people going to be allowed to park in the street in front of those parking areas? Because on some streets, like Ivanhoe, there's only a very limited amount of parking. And if I can't pull into that off-street parking, I don't know if the one in front of my house isn't there anymore, but were it there, if I can't pull into that, I'm going to park on the street. And therefore, I will have blocked, quote unquote, that parking space. So I just suggest that these are things that need to be thought about when you go and put something like this into the ordinance. So.
Mr. Mayor, the off-street parking spaces, however many there are left, already exist.
I understand that.
Okay, and the ordinance that we have, as streets are redone, repaired, right-of-ways come out, and the goal eventually is to have them reduced to the bare minimum. But I don't know how the way you communicate is through the ordinance. I suppose in your answering your question, it's hypothetical. Say somebody has a right-of-way that they pay the permit for and they come home and there's a car parked there. Well, if the police officer is called and he or she comes out, runs the plate, they find out who it is. I mean, there's no harm in telling them that that's, you're parked in a spot that the homeowner pays basically a license fee for. You can't, in other words, my response to you is you can't fix every problem.
But if that person isn't from Huntington Woods,
Yeah,
I mean, you're gonna tell them, they may be in who knows whose house.
right. Well,
So,
I understand.
you're gonna ticket them?
But you can still find out who they are.
And
I
then
mean,
what?
And I don't know that has ever occurred. I think what occurred here was a neighbor was parking in his or her neighbor's spot. So they maybe they knew what the deal was on it, maybe they didn't. But by allowing street parking with permit now, which we do, which you remember our Steve Fairman would never even hear of it, but Andrew approves it, so it's eliminated a lot of those issues.
And I understand all that, but having had one and knowing how they were used, and often used, and I never cared, but often they were used by people who were not necessarily neighbors. This I know came from a neighbor. I don't know why the neighbor didn't go talk to the neighbor, which is one of the other issues. But I just present to the commission a couple of things that you need to think about. You may decide to do this ordinance and be done with it, that's fine. But I think you need to realize that there are 2 instances that aren't addressed by this that may present problems in the future.
Well, I was going to say, is there any chance we could put a permit parking only sign? How many are there? I mean, we could remove them when we take them out.
A lot of
but-
signs.
Standing sign.
Yeah.
Oh, there are a lot? I mean,
I
thought-
would not say, in fact, the way the ordinance is written, using, what do you call, bricks that allow the grass
Yeah,
to go through
neighbors.
them, the whole idea is to keep these things as invisible as
Right,
possible.
right.
I mean, that's the whole idea, is not to make them eyesores and everything like that, because as you know, this has been a long siege battle over these things, and I think now with the off-street park, with the ability of people to park on the street with a permit, a lot of the problems have gone away and a lot of the demand, although I understand the people who have them, like them, and so forth and so on. But I guess what I see here is what frequently happens is you have an ordinance that's brought up, seems like a good idea, and then a circumstance comes up that you couldn't foresee, so you make a reasonable change.
That's all I'm suggesting, is that as you look at this, go into your second reading, that you may decide not to address these. But it's something that I noticed when I was reading over the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I mean, at least with respect to the first issue, somebody pulling into the right-of-way space, that person has to know that they're parking on somebody's private property. You know, they should know better
Or
than that.
not on the
No,
street.
They're not, they know they're not on the street.
But they,
So,
let me just say something, Carol, and that's this. When you come up to one of those, you're confused. You don't know, you want to park on the street, but you know that if you park on the street, you're blocking this funny area. So you ask yourself, as many people did when we had one, do I park in there or do I park on the street? If I park on the street, I'm blocking this. Was that put in? They don't know why it was put in. I know why it was put in.
Neither do
We didn't know
I.
that. I mean, listen, in
I've
the
lived here for
80s, we got rid of
42
ours.
years, I don't know why.
I don't either. We got rid of ours in the 80s, but I just, having had one.
yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Just some things, I mean, it's just too difficult to try to legislate it.
I understand,
So,
but I will
yeah.
tell you right now that the person who doesn't know what that is will park in front of it because they're parking on the street. And then the person who comes home and wants to drive in there may have his way blocked.
And hopefully then they'll be explained the situation by the police department and it won't happen again. So, you know, I mean, we try the best we can. I understand
Enough
what you're
said.
saying, Claire.
I'm not here to get into
No, I
an
know.
argument over
I
that.
know.
I'm telling you from having had one
Yeah.
and dealing with some of the realities of them, and in looking at your change in the ordinance and saying, you may have some problems that you ought to think about, that's all.
All right, thanks.
Any comments or questions at the commission? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? carries. Item number 4 is a consideration of the MDOT annual work permit.
An annual permit that we received from MDOT if we needed to do any work in the Woodward right away.
We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any public comments or questions? Commission? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have 6 sets of reports and minutes, so I have a motion to approve and file.
So moved.
Support.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Warrant number 342, do I have a motion to accept subject to full audit?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Closed session, I wanna change that.
Okay, that's coming up now.
Yep.
We have closed session.
And this would be to recess in a closed session pursuant to MCL 15.268 to discuss the pending litigation of Durant versus City of Huntington Woods.
And this will, I need a motion to that,
So moved.
Second.
and this will be a roll call vote. Will we be reconvening?
We may possibly be reconvened.
Mayor Pro Tem Iverson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jenks?
Yes.
Commissioner Olsman? Aye. Motion carries. City Managers Report.
Yeah, just a couple of items that are coming up. Hopefully, everybody received a mailer about, with the frequently asked questions flyer about the sewer bond referendum that's gonna be on the ballot on November 6th. We are having an informational meeting this Thursday at 7 o'clock here at City Hall with staff and the engineer to talk about the sewer and road bond referendum and then answer any questions that residents have. So I encourage anybody that has questions to either email me, call me, or attend the meeting on Thursday. And then Saturday, big day here in Huntington Woods, a lot of activities going on. First, there's the Men's Club and Women's League donut and cider sale from 8 till noon, and then the library's holding a used book sale from 10 to 4, and then there are numerous activities sponsored by Public Safety, DPW, and Parks and Rec. There's gonna be the Heyday celebration, an open house of Public Safety, and Touch a Truck at DPW. There are, the times basically are 3:30 to about 5:30. But children with special needs can attend earlier. You can contact any city departments to find out what those times are. And then last, from our clerk's office, the absentee ballots are gonna be going out pretty soon. They are lengthy, and there are a lot of propositions on them, so I would recommend, or the clerk would recommend, that you take a look at the ballots before you enter the ballot box, or you fill out your absentee ballot, so that you are informed on all those propositions.
We'll
and-
try and get those up on the website shortly, the sample ballots.
Yes. And that's it.
Are there any questions for the city manager? Okay, commissioners' remarks. Commissioner Olsman.
And no comments tonight, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
No comments this evening.
We're on a roll. Commissioner Jenks.
Oh.
I'll take their time. I did attend the annual Michigan Municipal League meeting in Grand Rapids. It was extremely interesting because it was a combination of local government units and the state planning organization and the local planning operations. One of the major speakers spoke about the fact that don't look to Washington or the state capitol for funding. It needs to really come locally. It's a scary kind of thing. It is not unique to Michigan. And as part of that, during the last 15 years, the state has diverted $3.1 million that should have come to our city through the revenue sharing and the 23% of funds agreement to carry on its own operations. So I'll talk about that more in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner. We did receive an award as part of the convention. We received a bronze certification from the Michigan Green Communities Initiative for our work here in Huntington Woods, particularly at Scotia Park. So it was nice to receive that award. And I wanted to remind everyone that we are in a voting competition with Pleasant Ridge for voter turnout. So please remember to look over that ballot and please remember to come out and vote. With that, we'll adjourn the regular city commission meeting and reconvene in 5 minutes.
All right. I'll see you guys then. See ya.
Yeah, of
Put that on
course.
the website,
Put it in writing.
He's putting that in
Jules.
so they know it's not
right
me.
on the website.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
You never know how the vote will turn out. You shouldn't leave.
have you here.
Okay, I'd like to reconvene the regular city commission meeting. Commissioner Olsman, do you have a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I would move that we enter into the settlement of this matter as set forth by our most capable attorney in this matter, Holly Vattersby.
I'll second that.
Why don't we go ahead and do a roll call for this?
Okay, roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Meeting's adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
You.